So after a very successful draft, at least in our opinion, a very successful draft, the recap is going to tell us everything we need to know here in just a second. But Mr. Irrelevant ended up being cornerback Marcus Allen, drafted to the same team, the Lions, that actually just traded cornerback DJ Reed Jr. So I wonder if there's a correlation there. Did that trade actually take place before, during, or after the draft? Nonetheless, top 3 picks in the draft, we already know. Sonny Styles, number 1 overall. Jeremiah Love went number 2 overall. And then you had Mateo Uiagalelei ended up going number 3 overall. And I like to believe that we answered the call for Anthony Richardson Sr. on drafting and improving upon the offensive line talent. And I'd like to believe that we drafted the offensive line talent in Caden Proctor. And taking a peek at it right now, as you can see, Caden Proctor actually looks like he's going to be elite. He has a hidden dev trait, and he is a 79 overall. And we followed that up with Oscar Delp being a 73 overall, then got a little steal in Katron Allen at a 72 overall. Even though he has that 87 speed, what he lacks in speed, we should be able to make up with as far as breaking tackle and trucking is concerned. Evan Stewart looks to be solid, 69 overall. Tommy Castellanos looks like to be the only bust of the draft for us with a 63 overall, but I think he'll probably make up for that in other areas as well. Trey Moore was a 67. Jeremy Bernard, possibly a reach as well, 63 overall. Wade Wooder's a 69. Saint a 66. Squirrel White, 65. 63 for Burnett. And Jacoby Lane ended up being the last pick for us with a 68 overall. And again, his speed isn't there, but his spectacular catch is going to come through clutch when we need it the most. So looking at other user drafts around the league to see how well everybody else did, it looks like the Bills had an excellent draft. Perkins, 76. Chase Roberts, 74. Campbell, 74. Dennis Sutton, 75. Jesus Christ. Sheffield, 71. Antonio Williams, 69, and then Altmaier being a 65. So right now, it looks like they ended up having the best draft of all users in this league. So, and then you follow that up, the Browns actually ended up having a really great draft as well. Davis, their number 1 pick, had a 75, and then they followed that up with their next number 1 pick. So they had basically, in a sense, back-to-back number 1 overall picks as they had 29 and 31. But their second first-round pick actually was better than the first, and he was a 76 overall. And then their third round pick ended up being better than both of them at a 77 overall. Then they had a 73 in Catalan. Then they had 70 was or a 70 overall was Dunker. 73 was Concepcion, so they got Concepcion. Wright a 67, Herkett a 68, Pierce a 64, a 70 for Cornell, 66 for Guy, 65 for Prysock. Jesus. 64 for Hibner, and Braun ended up being a 72 overall. So it looks like the Browns struck gold as well. So our next user, the Cardinals, he had a left tackle in Barber, who was a 73 overall, drafted with his first round pick. Then Ross, wide receiver, 76 overall with 92 speed for him in his second round. And his second round pick ended up being quarterback Jalen Daniels, a 65 overall. Then left tackle Shelton, a 69 overall. Then Moore, a 74 overall in the third round. And then his third round pick ended up being a 73 overall for Drake Bowen. He picked up Drake Bowen out of Notre Dame. Then left tackle Tristan Lee ended up being a 65. He got Carnell Tate in the third round with a 72 overall, 89 speed. Then Vanderos the third ends up being a 62 overall, another wide receiver. And then Haynes King, the last pick of the draft for him, at a 63 overall, who might be the fastest quarterback in the draft. I can't remember if he was. It might be Caden Salter. But Haynes King with an 86 speed, 88 acceleration. So you can do a lot of damage with that type of quarterback in your backfield. But the Chiefs didn't have many picks, but he hit on quite a few, as Sonny Styles was a 71 overall with 90 speed and 88 acceleration. Spencer Fano ended up being his next first round pick, a 77 overall. As you can see, if we didn't get Caden Proctor, Fano would have been a good go for us right there at a 77 overall. Then he got Nick Singleton in a second with a 72 overall. Brown Barian Brown at a 63 overall, Moton at a 69 overall, and Trevor Pena at wide receiver in the 5th round at a 73 overall. So the Colts, again, we're only going over user draft picks right now. We're not going over CPU. The Colts had a 77 overall and their number 1 overall pick, Logan Jones, and followed that up with a 74 overall in future quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. Fisher ended up being a 72 overall, Moore a 75 overall, Murdoch a 72 overall, and Zakee Wheatley a 69 overall for their last pick in this year's draft. Moving along to the next user team, which was, Jesus Christ, the Giants look like they didn't really have the best. Well, I take that back. Now that I look at the names, it looks like this was a pretty solid class. The overalls just don't tell the story behind this class, but they got the prized possession in Caleb Downs, who was a 78 overall, 91 speed, 93 acceleration. How we allowed him to slide to him, I don't know, but he ended up following that up with Taylon Green with a 63 overall and stole Zachariah Branch with a 68 overall, but 94 speed, 95 acceleration, and then got Jaden Ott, a 69 overall, 88 speed, 92 acceleration, and Barlev, left tackle, ended up being his last pick at a 65 overall there. So Lions, Takario Davis was his number 1 pick, 73 overall. Malik Muhammad, 74 overall, was his next 1st round pick. Then he had Damani Jackson, ended up being his first 2nd round pick at a 70 overall. RJ Maryland, his second round pick, ended up being a 72 overall. Tyreek Sapp, he's a big Florida fan, so this is no surprise, ended up being a 73. Patrick Payton, a 70 overall for him. He had a lot of 4th round draft picks. Vincent Anthony Jr. was a 69 overall for him. Cornerback Mansour Delane ended up falling to him in the 4th round at a 68 overall. Xavier Nwankpa ended up being a 71 overall. Jam Miller, a 65 overall. Then you had Harris, ended up being a 68 overall. Pettis ended up being Michael Pettis. He ended up being a 67 overall. We had him in our Raiders rebuild last year. So good to see him drafted by another user in here. Dylan Bell ended up being 65. And then Marcus Allen was Mr. Irrelevant in the draft at a 64 overall. So not too bad of a draft for the Lions. I still feel like the Colts might have had the best draft. Well, not the Colts. I think it was the Browns. I don't know. I done went through so many users already as it is. But Anthony Hill Jr. was a 76 overall to the Packers. So a great pick. Then you had Caden Salter, and it appears he was the fastest quarterback in the draft with an 87 speed. Igmanosin, followed that up with Igmanosin at a 71 overall. Then a 63 overall was his next pick. Carson Beck, he went quarterback again. Ended up being a 71 overall and actually better than Salter. So he might have reached on Salter, even though Salter you can turn into a star. Halsey was a 68. He drafted Aaron Anderson, a 69, Brown, a 64, and then 65 was Le'Veon Moss, his last pick of the draft. So that Aaron Anderson is no surprise because this guy is an LSU fan. So the Ravens ended up looks like they had a really top tier draft themselves. So Caleb Banks, a 73 overall. Then Hallman ended up being a 72 overall. Remain ended up being 73. Sawyer Robinson, a 67. Damon Claiborne, a 70. Drew Royer, a 70. And then Keelan Rutledge ended up being a 73. So every player in their class was a 70 except for one. So that was an elite class. And it looks like we have the same thing here. Saints drafted Eli Stowers, a 74 overall. Then followed that up with their 2nd round pick, who ended up being a 74 overall, and Dylan Carson as well. And then he drafted Dylan Edwards, a 67 overall, but a 93 speed, 93 excel. So a solid draft pick right there, as well as Fernando Carmona being a 74 and Jake Renfro a 72. And Seahawks, I think this is the last user of this year's draft. Jeremiah Love ended up being a 77 overall. Kitzelman ended up being 74. Everett ended up being 72. He got Jayshon Barham, who ended up being a 71. Xavier Scott, a 68. Hankerson, a 69. Then he got Westmoreland, ended up being a 68. Lee Hunter at a 67, as well as Smith at a 60. Trey Smith at a 67. So it looks like he had a pretty solid class as well. They might not all be 70s, but they're all borderline 70s. 4 of them actually being in the 70s, 1 pushing on the 80s. And the Chiefs, Number 1 overall pick ended up being Sonny Styles, 71 overall. And we actually already went through the Chiefs. What am I talking about? We're looking at the overall draft picks and who ended up being the top of the top draft picks this year. Now it's time for the biggest part of the league, and that is advancing to undrafted free agency. And although this isn't exactly like what you're going to expect in Madden 27 as far as undrafted free agency is concerned, it's still a free-for-all. So it's first come, first serve. Whoever gets to them gets them first. So time to go ahead and check out some of these storylines we got going on this week. Upgradable players, things of that nature. But again, like I said, before we do so, we have to attack these undrafted free agents before anybody else is able to attack these undrafted free agents. But looking at the cap space, we don't have a lot of room to play with, 3.98 million. So we got to be diligent in the draft picks, or not draft picks, but the undrafted players that we decide we want to sign here in free agency. So let's take a peek and see what is available out there. Of course, we want to look for practice squad eligible only, because that's where the rookies will pop up. So here we have Dylan Barrett, a 68 overall. Does he have a dev? No, he doesn't have a dev. It still looks like it may be worth the money spent. 1 year, 1.7 million. Let's take a peek, see further if there's anybody else who might be available out there who has a dev trade. Lyndon Cooper, he doesn't have a dev trade. He's worth 1.6 million. Brady Wilson, does he have? Damn, he doesn't have one either, but he is a 68 overall as well. I think that might be the one right there. 6'2", 298 out of Virginia. Yeah, we're going to roll with Brady Wilson right there. And he may possibly end up being our starting center before the season is over with. So let's take a peek at Will. Okay, so Watson Trent is a 70 overall with 81 speed. Eric Gentry, we like what we got right here. Let's go ahead and pull the trigger on him. 65 overall. All right, so we're good there. Let's take a peek at quarterback. See who went undrafted. Even though we drafted a replacement, Miller Moss. Ugh. So none of these guys that are available in free agency aren't really worthy of going after. It was worth the look. We're cool on Tommy Castellanos, especially with him having a hidden dev trait, but it doesn't hurt to take a peek at what they actually have available in free agency. And what they actually have isn't really that spectacular. We could pick somebody up and end up just stashing them on the practice squad for future reference, but I'm not really seeing anything too appeasing. Finn with an 82 speed, 84 excel, but I think we're good right there. Not really a ton that we can use as far as undrafted free agency is concerned. And like I said, we don't really have much to spend anyways. So that's going to wrap up this episode. We're already around 13 minutes, so we'll save all the official year 2 action for the next episode. As always, if you're here for the first time or you're returning and you haven't liked or subscribed already, please do so. Click that notification tab so you can stay up to speed with more of this Jaguars rebuild as well as other Madden 26 content. Again, I appreciate you all for tuning in. That's been my time. Till next time. Peace.